Hello and welcome to a very special episode of the Sales Ops Demystified podcast, because today we have two guests. We have, Alex, would you say you're a guest or a host?
Well, I think I've just been demoted, haven't I? I'm going to take it as a chance to talk even more than normal.
Okay, good. So we have Alex, who you guys should know, co-host, now demoted to guest. We also have Tony. Now, both Alex and Tony. Hey, Tony.
Hey.
Well, welcome to the show. I understand you've listened to a number of our episodes.
I have, absolutely.
and so the goal of today's episode is to talk about a transition that we have been talking about on the show probably since like episode 37. And for people that may not know, we've done about 200 episodes. That transition is a transition from sales ops to RevOps. And so what we're going to do, we're going to look back at some of the highlights from the 200 episodes, and then we're going to talk about this shift and why we're going to be making a very special announcement at the end of this episode that you're going to have to wait to listen to. So let's kick off. And maybe I'll start with you, Tony. And I'm picking on you here.
Hello.
But from the episodes that you have listened to, and it doesn't have to be like a specific moment, but what do you think that we've done well or has been good from the show?
I think one thing that I take the most from is there's such a lack of, here is a specific use case of doing a specific thing. And the more and more people that it is that I speak to, whether it's Alex internally, whether it's like one of our clients, it always brings to life, I'm like, oh my God, there's that particular bit that I now know how to do, or a different way of looking at it, or a different metric to kind of look at a conversion between. So for me, I think it is not just talking about, oh, generally this is sales ops, this is RevOps, and yeah, we do reporting and tech. It's the specific use cases and how they're applied to certain businesses within their industries and what it is that they're looking to kind of gain. That's for me is the real big one. It's the most one that lands for me.
And I just realized that we didn't actually introduce you, Tony. So Tony, head of RevOps, RevOps at Ebster. So yeah, thank you for that feedback. I totally agree. Alex, has there been like one specific highlight for you?
Oh, one. I thought about two.
Just one.
I think must have been, it was one of my earlier episodes. We did an episode with Dana Tyrion from Genesys.
It's designing the ideal rep experience. We have to think about what they go through on a daily basis and have some real appreciation for the challenges that they face. And I've had conversations with people in technology about that ideal rep experience. The rep is no longer judging their experience based upon the experience that they had at the last sales organization that they were working for. They're judging it based upon the experience that they have with everything that they are transacting with on a daily basis.
And that was probably one of my all-time favorites. He just said something that was so clear. I think other people have said it in many different ways, but he put it so clearly that really the goal of RevOps and the processes we design and the sort of the tech we implement and just generally how we set it up is to really enable those kind of those commercial teams. And so a lot of people have talked about them being the customer, but he said we've got to make sure we're looking to do everything through their lens and not just sort of serving them as the customer, but more, we want to design this experience for them that makes them want to stay and work for us, not go somewhere else. And he linked it to things like, Garmin or Apple Watch, fitness trackers. We need to compete on that kind of B2C experience with our own, our own teams, our own employees, really give them an unrivaled experience, not worrying about just competing on comp, but really giving them things that they would choose themselves. Particularly, he mentioned when it comes to tech, that they would actually choose to use themselves, not just something we've saddled them with because we've got a certain requirement. And that was just really eye-opening for me, particularly with some of the stuff I do. I get to feed back into our product design, and as a really, a great concept to sort of lead the kind of request for what we want. I thought that was fantastic.
It's funny because me and Alex didn't talk about our best moments prior to this, and the thing that my biggest insight that I've learned from sales ops professionals, which I've then applied into other areas of my working life, is that the salesperson is the customer. Mm. Tony, would you agree?
100%. I think when Alex, I'll write it down. also the customer, literally. I think we've got to treat everybody the same. It's as much as about getting from A to B, but you do that via enabling and supporting the people internally that need that help. So getting market to be able to market more, to get salespeople to be able to sell more. It's the internal customer, and like you say, with any sort of tech or anything that it is that you put into the business, you've got to have that buy-in, and buy-in comes from making sure that your customers are happy.
For sure. Now, the other thing I've quite liked, I'll share in a second. Before we go into that, I've got some stats. 200 episodes, obviously. In terms of downloads, and I'm going to put this as a quiz to the floor, we've been running for just over 2 years. If you had to take a stab at total downloads, maybe I'll give you like benchmarks. Do you think it's like over 50,000?
Alex, you first.
Yes.
Tony, what do you think?
The fact that you started there, I have to say yes.
Do we think it's over 140,000? I've jumped right to it, basically.
Yes.
Correct. It is 140,593 downloads, but actually, that may not be. Yeah, that's it. 140,593 downloads. The most downloaded out of all episodes, and we're going to call her out here. I'm not going to ask Alex to guess because it'll be one out of 200, but it was Kathy Chu.
1, don't rush to automate. 2, make sure that you have a good process, because automating a bad process is not helpful. Marrying the art of sales with the science of scale. And then make sure that it's an agile system, one that's modular, that can grow and adapt and change with the business.
That was going to be my guess.
Really?
Yeah.
Total of 4,128. Sorry, Alex, I should have given you the chance to guess there. Obviously, Kathy is the SVP Worldwide Sales Strategy and Operations at VMware, so congratulations to Kathy. Anyway, the other thing that I've taken away, and it's not so much a specific insight, but it's almost like the warmth that sales operations professionals have for each other. Like the warmth that we've got, Alex, specifically from more recent guests as the show has got more popular. Like 50% of guests at the end of recording, like, thank you so much for what you guys do for the profession. And we've been able to also so let's say we had a guest, I think it happened in Stockholm, we had a guest who was based there, and then 3 months later we had another guest who was based there. We're able to connect them two together, and then I think they started like a little sales ops meet up in Stockholm. So it's like this warmth and the community that exists within the sales ops world, and we've been able to facilitate that a little bit, which I think has been super cool. So I look forward to continuing that. Any other highlights that we've particularly enjoyed over the 200 episodes? I obviously have like favorites, but I don't really want to call people out. Like,
you're not allowed to have favorites at all.
Yeah, exactly. So every sales ops guest has been my favorite. Had a lot of fun with all of them. Learned a shed load from all of them. Like literally everyone, there's been a takeaway. But Alex, I think you had a second one.
Yeah. So Tom's the parent with 200 children that he loves equally, and I'll do the name dropping, because it's not so much about favorites. It's about things that particularly stood out as well, and those therefore aren't necessarily actually better. They just were the things that were most important to you in the moment. The other one that made a massive difference to me was we did an interview with Hank Taylor that I really enjoyed.
A lot of what we've done that's been very useful is tying together and integrating our product data and putting it into the CRM, making it available, searchable, reportable by ourselves and the sales reps. Some of the sales reps who are more savvy with tools then have figured out how to really utilize this data. And it's really fun to have those kind of pioneers, because my mandate to my team is always, look at that pioneering AE and then automate everything that they do and take away what makes them special and give it to everybody else. and force them to be special in a different way, which we can then copy and replicate. So probably tying together that product data with the lead and contact and sales data is the most impactful thing we've done.
He was great, very knowledgeable, very confident, a lot of fun to talk to. But at the end, just apologies to everyone, because after we hang up and we do the goodbyes and the end piece, he just said, he said, "How did it go?" And he goes, "Yeah, I enjoyed it. I just wish I got some of my hot takes." And we had this whole other conversation while we're all realized we should probably go to our next meeting, but we just don't want to leave. And not only was it really interesting, but that actually informed how I changed my questions. And I realized, let me give more of the floor to people, because people have their own things, whether it's a hot take or just something you've been thinking about recently. And what a great way to try and end an episode is to actually hear those individual thoughts. And I found that since we've done that I've really noticed, an increase as well in quality content. So big shout out to Hank for all that inspiration there, and apologies that none of his made it into the show because we stopped recording.
Of course, shout out to Hank. Let's now move on to looking at this shift, this transition between or from sales to a more comprehensive, let's say, revenue function. And I'm going to pass more of the floor to you guys, because obviously you guys live and breathe this kind of stuff. So my first question, I'll go to Tony. Where do we think that revenue operations has come from?
Really good question. I think, like with anything, I think everything's evolved, hasn't it? So we've now got predictable revenue models. You split in the traditional 360 role, and it's all come from being more efficient, applying skill sets, all these different areas. And I think RevOps has kind of emerged because it just makes good sense. It really does. That's the strap line. Just makes good sense. But I think when you've got a sales team that's underpinned by really great ops, and you've got some incredibly strong commercial leaders, there's no stopping you. And I think with revenue operations, if you're looking at the rest of the business with that lens, you've got a nice holistic view of the big picture, but you've got aligned objectives, methodologies, goals, process, and ultimately you're going to be ensuring that you've got the same efficiencies and gains across the entirety of the bow. So you've got those same compound effects that can be applied absolutely everywhere. And I think the sustainability of a business now is it's always going to be placed on how well you spot opportunities, but then also more after risk and loss aversion. But we now know that the most opportunities that can be gained are the point of after sales. So it just makes good sense to have a really commercially focused operations teams that kind of sits end to end across the entirety of your sales cycle. It's just, I think, just a natural evolution of SaaS.
The natural evolution. Alex, would you agree?
Yes, I think that I would tie it in a sort of a same idea to the revolution, or the evolution of the idea over the last 10, 15 years, or of really trying to make the seamless customer journey, and that became almost an overly played thing. We all realized we need this seamless customer journey. We can't have them getting a different experience with different teams or different parts of the product, whatever. And that's become as I said, so well known, it's almost, not very insightful anymore. But I think RevOps then really came out of understanding, well, if we want to make the journey seamless for the customer, we need to make the running of the teams internally seamless as well, because without that, we're set up for things to clash, and there to be gaps, to things fall through the cracks, and different teams pull in slightly different directions. So if we can manage and run the operation from that one centralized vantage point, then we can give that best chance to deliver that customer experience that we're aiming for.
Totally agree. I remember actually the fear of HubSpot speaking at a conference, and he was saying that because competition is expanding, it's getting easier and easier to build your product. The way you differentiate is by having a great customer experience, and I guess the RevOps team is going to be able to help you with that. Why is well, I think we've probably answered this question. We've answered why RevOps is better than sales operations, because you have this more cohesive journey for the customer. Is there any other ways that we would say RevOps, having a RevOps function, is better for a business or for their customers than sales operations?
I'll go. So I think for a start, what you call something doesn't necessarily impact what's actually happening. So just in case people, we're not saying if you've got the wrong title, but the idea I think makes a difference. And one of the things I've been doing, building some dashboards for some customers that go across the sort of the full kind of life cycle of the commercial process. So from when we get human interaction from the sort of the SDR side all the way through to CS. And just trying to think what needs to be there, and realizing that all of them, you've got your inputs and your outputs. But aside from the CS team, at the end, you've got further outputs down the line that assess the quality of what you've produced to some extent, assuming that the next team are doing their job. So let's just say if you're an SDR and you're tasked to create a certain number of opportunities, well, actually, if those opportunities don't close, maybe you're not creating the right ones. And even if they do close, but they all churn, they don't grow, again, were you really creating the right ones? And we need to have this united journey. So I think that's where it becomes really hard if you're trying to manage all those departments completely separately. What happens if your close rates are too low? You're not winning enough deals. Is that because you're qualifying poorly and you're pushing the wrong deals in? Is it because your sales team just aren't good enough, or there's not enough of them, or whatever? And again, if you've got churn or LTV problems, well, that could have started at any part of the journey. And having that unified way to run your whole commercial team, I think, can really mean that rather than that tendency for politics and a blame game and people driven by different KPIs that can't be resolved, you've got a really much easier way to focus on a unified objective.
Beautifully said. Do we think that a sales ops professional can seamlessly move into their role in revenue operations? What skills will they need to develop, or do we think it's going to be a seamless journey? We have had that with a number of guests, actually, Alex, that have come on and they've been ex-sales operations but then transitioned into RevOps. What should a sales ops professional consider if they're trying to make that move?
I would say, because I've worked with so many wonderful sales ops people when I was literally just selling. And I think that's probably why the community is so well, because they're such unsung heroes of they sit in the background and they move all these different parts and never really get a thank you in the background. I think if someone's considering moving from sales ops to RevOps, you want to probably get more aligned with the commercial leaders that are kind of the sales managers, the VPs, all that sort of stuff, because I think where the differences lie is probably having more of a strategic input. Revenue operations is obviously you're over all different departments. You're looking at opportunities and you're looking at insights and data, and you're making sure that those kind of feed back into the entirety of the ecosystem. So if you're thinking about sales ops and it's just being this part, and you're enabling KPIs and process and all that sort of stuff, it's so well versed in sales because it's always been sales, do the pipeline. I think where the gap is having knowledge around CS, having knowledge around marketing, knowledge around product where it is that it sits, and probably just getting more aligned to what people do day to day, what are their objectives, what are their goals, and where is the opportunity outside of just great pipeline. So I would say just get a better understanding of how SaaS is kind of built, how it's put together, and what the objectives are of each person. And the methodology that it is that you use in sales ops can quite literally just be applied everywhere. It's just more so the strategy behind it, I would say.
And just to add to that, I think as we talked about, Tom, as you mentioned, the salesperson is the customer. That seems to be the driving philosophy for almost everyone we've spoken to. And I think that means that the transition from sales ops to RevOps should be relatively easy. You're already in a serving job, and a job where you're not trying to be the hero, you're trying to enable others to shine. And so I can't imagine a group of people better ready to go and just serve more people, because really it's almost should be relatively seamless. And Tony's absolutely right. There's going to be lots of extra knowledge that will be helpful on the journey, but at the same time, if you're managing a team, you shouldn't be doing it all yourself. So you can lean on others. And it's been really interesting talking to people who have different sort of setups of teams. Do you run RevOps with marketing ops, sales ops, CS ops underneath, or do you run RevOps with, say, business analysts, sort of reporting, tech, and kind of comp? There's all sorts of different ways to structure it. And I do wonder if it was a hybrid approach where you take kind of domain specialists, so someone who knows a lot about marketing, as well as, and you look for specialists in both an area of the business, but also in an area of operations. So whether that's the sort of process driven, whether you're in the tech, whatever it might be, and you create those sort of hybrid teams. I keep talking about one thing. There was a very influential video that Spotify released in development circles about how do you do agile working at scale, and how do you structure teams so that people can still learn from each other. And it was really helpful because one of the big things was you want to work with like-minded people on the same sort of teams, but you also want to learn from people who are a bit different to you. And so they've got some really great ideas there for how you can both work in sort of mini silos that are not completely separate, but in kind of pods of people that are, you've got a purpose together and you link, while actually having cross pod sort of fertilization, for a better term. So you're really benefiting from everyone and advancing your career.
Very nice. What do we think that sales ops functions? What are the challenges going to be as they evolve into this model? What are the things that I guess potentially even like the head of the CRO should be considering if he wants to inform his sales ops team that actually we're transitioning to RevOps?
I think we've covered it in regards to kind of knowledge. I think, like you say, it's the whole point of, and it rolls into what Alex just said there, like some of the best businesses that have just gone from zero to millions and millions of pounds are the ones that have been built by previous engineers. Like they're not even the salespeople. And it's about building things that genuinely work. And I think more so than anything, every RevOps looks different in every single business, which is why it's so great that you guys have been doing so many different use cases and how it's set up and all that sort of stuff, because you can say, right, what the challenges it is that you're going to face, and realistically, we don't really know what those are going to be. But I do believe that, in my mind, the setup of how that looks is sales ops. You've got your marketing ops, and you've got whatever ops in the background, but you've got RevOps kind of sitting on top of that, making sure that it feeds the strategy. It has to be that lens. If you're going to have RevOps, it's not going to be a bolt on. I believe it's something that filters all the way through into these ops teams. So it might be a little bit of a change and adjustment, but I think it will be more of an informed one.
Definitely. I said earlier that, in some ways the change could be easy, and also it doesn't necessarily matter what you're called. You could already be running in a RevOps manner. And in the same way, you could have your title changed from sales ops to RevOps, and you could still run in a kind of more siloed manner where the teams are separate. So I think it's going to very depend on the business, but I think more and more we're moving away from people in the workplace being kind of individuals who are just looking out for themselves, and collaboration. It's by far the norm. Maybe I've just been fortunate to work in great companies, but and so I don't see there being big territory spats in most cases. But again, if you figure out the leadership and the reporting model, and with anything like this, if you're taking on something that you've not got lots of direct experience on, you're going to have to lean on other people anyway. That should all help that kind of collaborative working as you work out, you're a team where you need each other. So I think that it shouldn't be too challenging, but the main thing to do is to make sure it's not just a change in name, but it is a change in structure and philosophy that is mirrored through.
So a question we've asked more to the start of the series was about whether a sales ops person needs experience in sales, and it's helpful for a sales ops person to have experience in sales. Now, Tony, obviously you have. So actually, let's get your insight here before I move on with my question.
Yeah, 100%. I think even if it's not directly within a role, I think you need to have experience of working very, very closely with a sales team, understanding why things look a certain way. So I think as a RevOps person, you need to almost act as like an internal consultant. You need to be talking about the people, what it is they're trying to deliver, all these different things. Because I've worked with sales ops in the past, and like I say, they're doing these different bits, but if it doesn't translate of what it is that you're trying to achieve, and then the data points that it is that you need, and how the process needs to look, it's very, very difficult for it, again, not to become disjointed, because you're looking at it through a different lens. So I think the more experience you can get, or at least exposing yourself to different areas and why the areas look the way that they are. You almost want to read the rules before you break them. I would make sure that you kind of go in, you understand what it is that you're looking to do, because it's ultimately always going to make your processes better. Like, we can all build, but it's understanding the why behind everything, because ultimately then if you understand the why and the objective, you can continue to evolve and keep it going.
And just quickly, the counter to that, I think, is some of the people we've talked, is that direct experience yourself can tend to make you trust more on what you've experienced and think, you're always right. Whereas a lack of first-hand experience, not understanding, can mean you're more tempted to really lean on the people living it. And so, again, if you've got experience in one organization, it might be different to the one you're moving into. And so either way, whether you have it or not, I think never assuming that just because you feel that you've walked, in similar shoes, that it's the same as the shoes of the people you're working for. And I think, again, coming back to, the salesperson, or in the case of RevOps, the commercial person being the customer is going to be really helpful to think, well, regardless of whether I've, done this for 10 years, let me go and let me keep seeing and checking my ideas past them. And ultimately, there's a decision to be made, and sometimes, and you can't please everyone. But I think having that approach can mitigate some of the things. But I'm sure, as you said to me, that having that experience is going to be massively helpful. But it was just interesting with some of the people who've come from a more operations background saying how they're just very good at leaning on people who've got that direct knowledge and really taking it in and helping bring the wins from other areas of business into those departments.
Yeah, without a doubt. I think it's definitely a mix. I mean, the first time I'm coming to Ebster, Alex and I think we scheduled like a 30-minute catch-up call, and we ended up staying on the phone for past an hour, just talking about all these different variables of how we look at sales and how things move through the funnel. And I come out of the conversation, Alex, I think we both challenged each other about 20 odd times, but I come out of that conversation with a totally new perspective from Alex, because he hadn't come from a sales background, and it was very methodical and very black and white. And I think that the community side of things is wonderful because it's very formulaic. It's like, well, you could look at this and look at this. Like, you can't really argue with the data and the insights that you kind of put together. So I think if you continue to learn, keep your ears open, because everybody has a different lens that they're looking through, and ultimately it's always just going to make you better.
So thank you for the very nuanced responses there. I was leading on to the fact that if a sales ops person is transitioning to RevOps, do we think we should send them to be a customer support rep for a couple of weeks?
I think it's going to depend on the organization, and the amount of resource you have in the time. But I do think if you are transitioning to something you've got no experience of, some shadowing or working, going in as a junior on a team could be quite helpful. How that looks, whether it's actually full time for a while or whether you're just trying to do bits, but you probably need some way to broaden your experience.
I would say no. I think, especially coming from my own point of view, is I lean into ops because I didn't like doing sales. I didn't like doing the extroverted kind of, let's get on the phone, let's do all that. I think if objectively you're looking for somebody to really understand what the hell is going on and how they can absorb all these learnings, is you want to build a team that is not scared of going, this is really great, but this is absolutely terrible. And the more that you can foster that environment, you're going to remove friction more and more and more and more. So if you can sit somebody else in that culture and go, right, speak at this person, how do we make your life better? How do we do this? You're ultimately going to get the best results. And also you're not going to kill that person's spirit as well. Like, they're not going to sit there and be like, oh my God, I've got to get on the phone. I don't feel like they need to feel it firsthand in order to be able to get that. But you need the connection and the communication is huge. Like, you need to create an environment that fosters being vulnerable to be able to be better.
Great answer. Now for the special announcement. So as we've been threatening almost over the past 100 episodes, you may have already guessed, but we are going to be rebranding the show from Sales Ops Demystified to RevOps Demystified as of this episode going live. So my final question to you guys is, what do we think? And now we've managed this transition, I'd like to say that perhaps the podcast has even accelerated the transition. What do we think is going to happen to the future of RevOps? What are we looking at in the next 12 to 24 months in this area?
I think it's going to go bigger. It's going to go wider. It's going to go deeper into business. I think it's such an exciting place to be. It is quite literally, oh, it used to look like that. It doesn't matter. Rip that apart, stitch those bits together, go over here. I think it's such an exciting space to be in because all businesses look different, which means the role can hybrid about. You can set it up however it is that you want. But I think the more we can apply the philosophy, the methodologies, the strategic input, the more we'll be able to grow business. And it means that people can start to specialize. They can start selling more, marketing more, doing all these different areas. And I'm just really excited about, well, first it was over the last 2-3 years, it's gone sales ops, now RevOps. Like, what is it going to look like in 2-3 years, and what sort of influence is it going to have? But yeah, I think it's a very, very exciting space. So I'm looking forward to more and more happening on the show.
Yeah, I kind of think that like sales ops is now taking over RevOps. Now maybe RevOps is just going to take over the whole company, and soon the CEO, like we won't need a CEO anymore.
The whole world.
We won't need HR.
Yeah.
We'll just have a team of revenue operations people.
You got a problem? No problem. Let me put it in a process.
Would you agree, Alex? Like the end of
the CEO. I might not sign off on that one, but I'm not sure I'm going to be very good at predicting the future. So what I think about looking at where I think we are now, where we could be better, my thought is I still think a lot of our technology that we use is really more siloed, and obviously our team we've got specialists. So and then the ops kind of run the gamut, but you don't have, for example, a revenue person who does some, is working the marketing team and the sales team, and sort of experiencing across the, we've found that the designers specialize there. So I just wonder if that next step is something where we tie back in. It's maybe even just to return to using something like Salesforce, more as the primary thing throughout the business, because maybe it's going back to go forwards. But I just think because with the sort of proliferation of tools and things we have, some simplicity is probably the next step to create again that seamless journey. Make sure everyone's systems are all properly talking to each other. You still need that single source of truth, and I think that's not just for numbers for the CFO, but that needs to be on a sort of a daily reporting of an operations basis as well, to really understand the flow through of the entire revenue journey and what's going on, and be able to start to pinpoint things. And with that, I think comes something that's already a transition, but really that focus on the experience of the rep with the tech. So really, how can we make their lives easier and easier? And I think there's so much to do there with sort of data and intelligence around things like best next action. I still don't think we've really seen what's to come on some of that. I very much see like a sort of a console that really has great intelligence and is busy priming you what the next thing to do on these ones. Whether you're a CS rep and it's highlighting the accounts that are at risk, or the ones for upsell, or whether you're sales and it's showing you the ones that you need to focus on now because they're going to be most likely to impact this quarter, or whatever it may be. I still think there's more to come in that sphere, and maybe it's not the next year, but maybe it's the next 3 to 5. I think of more of a revolution in how everyone interacts with technology. That would be what I would hang my hat on, and inevitably laugh at myself in 5 years' time for getting it so wrong.
Yeah, some wisdom there from Alex. Right, guys, so a couple of thank yous. Thank you, Alex, for being a wonderful co-host over the past 50 episodes, would you say?
I can't remember, but wow.
30 to 50. Anyway,
You're blushing.
The feedback on our new style of episodes, where we like tag team almost, so we jump in and out as hosting, has been really good, and it's also re-energized me for the show as well. So thank you for that, Tony. Hoping we see you more on the podcast. Maybe we can bring you on for specific episodes.
Oh, I would love it. Absolutely. I can tell you a little bit more about what we're doing internally at Ebster as well. And I would love to.
Yeah, I mean, if we get a sign off from the leadership team, I'd love to like dig into the whole of Ebster's like RevOps function. I don't know if they would be happy with that, but I think that would be valuable for the audience.
I've got slides
Oh, really?
for days,
Okay.
so I'll speak to the big bosses.
Okay, awesome. And then, of course, I need to thank the listeners because I think we have the most downloaded show in Sales Ops. It's quite hard to tell in the podcasting world, but I'm pretty confident we have the most downloaded show in Sales Ops, and we have that because of the listeners and also because of the 200 guests who've been kind enough to share their wisdom. Now, the question remains, can we also become the most downloaded show in revenue operations? I think it's slightly more competitive, but I'm also very confident in our skills to do that. So thank you, Alec. Thank you to Tony. Thank you to all our beautiful, wonderful, amazing guests, and of course, listeners.